Hello, my little furballs. I am your host, Golden Chonk, and tonight we are going to dive into some true ghost stories. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered if the dead are not just trapped, but are still choosing to stay? What if they are watching you? What if they are waiting for something, or for someone? Tonight, you will hear stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the dead and the living. This is your chance to hear an hour of true, scary ghost stories you have never heard before. Before we begin our terrifying tale, please make sure you've hit that subscribe button, liked this video, and shared it with your friends. And don't forget to leave a comment below and let me know which story spooked you the most. Let's get started, shall we? Part 1. The Locked Room. I lived in a boarding house during my last year of college. It was one of those old Victorian homes that had been turned into separate rental units. It was cheap, which, looking back, should have been my first red flag. There were 5 of us in the house, all students, and the landlady, Miss Evelyn, who lived in the basement unit. She was ancient, nice but quiet, and very particular about the house rules. Most were normal. No parties, no candles, no guests after midnight. But there was one big rule. Do not enter the locked room upstairs. The house had 6 bedrooms, but only 5 were rented. The 6th door was at the very end of the hallway, right past mine, and it was always locked. It was heavy old wood with a big brass knob, and no sign or number on it. I thought maybe it was a storage unit, but I always had this feeling when I walked past it, like the air was colder. A couple of us joked about it once. One of the other tenants, Sean, said that he tried the handle one night just to see. The next day, Miss Evelyn told him she'd evict him if he ever touched it again. No warning, no smile. Things started getting weird about 2 months in for me. I'd hear noises at night, soft thuds, shuffling. Once or twice, a dragging sound, like furniture scraping across hardwood, always from behind that door. One night, I was up late studying and heard whispering. I couldn't make out the words, just a low, steady murmur from the other side of the wall. I pressed my ear to the door and the whispering stopped. Then, something tapped. 3 slow knocks. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I asked Miss Evelyn about it. She just smiled like I'd told her a knock-knock joke. She said, "That room doesn't like attention," and then she just walked away. I started avoiding the end of the hallway, kept my headphones in, and stayed out later just to dodge the creepy sense of dread that seemed to leak out of that locked room. But then came the night that I heard my voice. I'd just gotten into bed. My door was shut, and the house was quiet. And from the other side of the wall, faint and muffled, I heard my own voice whisper, "Hey, it's me." It wasn't just similar, it was exact. The cadence, the tone, like someone had recorded me and was playing it back. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it, but I know what I heard. I moved out 2 weeks later, broke my lease. Evelyn didn't fight me on it. She just handed me my deposit and said, "The house is easy when it's quiet." Part 2. The Haunted Laundromat. I inherited a laundromat that I didn't want. My Uncle Ray passed away in February. He was a quiet guy, never married, no kids. He was the man who never showed up to a family function, but always sent birthday cards with a crisp $20 inside. All I really knew about him was that he ran this 24-hour laundromat just off the interstate and didn't trust banks. So when the attorney told me that he'd left the whole thing to me, including the land, I figured I'd drive down, look it over, and probably sell it. I wasn't expecting the place to still be open. It was just past 11 p.m. when I pulled into the gravel lot. A fluorescent "open" sign was still buzzing in the window, and 2 of the machines were spinning inside. I walked in and was hit with that familiar detergent and metal smell, like heat and soap, and something slightly burnt. The air was dry, and there was no one behind the counter, no customers, just the hum of old appliances doing their thing. There was a long mirror across the back wall, and I caught my own reflection. Half lit, road-tired, and deeply uncomfortable. I don't know why, but the place felt both homey and eerie. I hit the bell on the front counter, but there was no answer. That's when I noticed a dryer in the back corner, number 6. It was a different model than the others, slightly rounder, older, almost retro. All the others were beige, but this one was steel grey with flaking red letters. The door had a tiny dent in it, like someone had kicked it in, and unlike the rest, it had no coin slot, just a faded yellow sticker that read, "Do not use, not in service." It was the only dryer making noise. I walked over, expecting to see it rattling or glitching, but no, it was running smoothly. The soft thump, thump, thump sound came from inside, like something was rolling around. It wasn't plugged in. How was that possible? I opened it, and it stopped instantly. Inside was an old towel. It was blackened and burned on one edge, like it had been left too close to a space heater. The moment I touched it, the lights flickered twice and then stabilized. I backed away and let the towel fall to the floor. That was the first night there. Over the next 2 weeks, weird stuff started happening. The cameras I had installed for insurance kept cutting out between 2 and 3 a.m. The same machines would spin, washers 4 and 7 and dryer 6, when no one was in the building. I had a buddy who's an electrician, and he looked at the wiring. He said the panel behind the dryer was wrong. When I asked what he meant, he just said that it didn't connect to the rest of the system, that it looked patched into something older. I was staying in the little manager's office upstairs. One night, I was jolted awake by what sounded like muffled screaming. I ran downstairs with a bat, thinking maybe a homeless person had broken in or gotten stuck. The door was locked, no windows were open, but dryer 6 was running again. Something inside of it was banging against the door, like fists, loud and desperate. I opened it. It was empty. No towels, nothing. Just a faint burning smell and a warm trail of water pooling onto the floor. I don't scare easy, but I called my sister at 3 a.m. that night. I told her I was thinking of selling everything as is. 2 days before I had someone lined up to come and appraise the property, I found a box of receipts and logs in the storage closet. They were handwritten, going all the way back to 1978. My uncle had recorded every incident that had ever occurred in the laundromat. Mostly boring stuff, but near the back was a page titled, "The Fire, October 13th, 1983. I didn't know about the fire. Apparently, a local woman, a single mom, had worked nights and fallen asleep, waiting for her clothes to dry. Her 5-year-old daughter was with her. The wiring caught fire in the back. The police went up fast. They only ever found the mother. The girl was presumed dead, though her remains were never located. The report ended with, "Dryer 6 was the ignition point. Manufacturer claims they never made a model matching its description." I think Uncle Ray knew about the weirdness. I think he kept the laundromat running because it kept something contained, like it was a prison cell that only worked if people were still using the other machines, feeding it quarters and cycles in time. I think the girl never left, or if she did, something else took her place. I often see dryer 6 spinning. I'm never surprised, but sometimes when I open it, I see that burned towel back inside. I don't even know if it's the same one, or how it gets in there. Probably time to get rid of this thing, but from what I've read, I think Uncle Ray tried that already. I'm tempted to keep things exactly as they are. I've already inherited this laundromat I didn't want. I don't want to inherit some bad luck by messing things up or changing things. So, I guess it just stays for now. Part 3. The roller rink. I was a 90s kid. My hometown is really small, and there wasn't a lot to do there. We had one park and one roller rink that everyone went to. The roller rink closed in '92, when I was only 6. By the time I turned 12, it was just an abandoned building that teenagers used to hang out in. One of my friends lived across the street, so we would wait for the teens to leave and raid the place for any stashed alcohol. We rarely had any luck, but one night we found a pint of whiskey with a little bit left in the bottle. There was enough for all three of us to take a couple of sips. It gave us a pretty good buzz, so we hung out for a while and kept looking around. There were no skates left behind the counter, but we found an old newspaper from when the rink closed down. We were so young when it happened that we never knew the reason. I'd always assumed it just went out of business, but apparently a kid died there. The article called it a tragic accident, but didn't give many details, just that a young boy fell victim to a terrible accident, and that the family was filing a wrongful death suit. We couldn't exactly look up the details online back then, so we asked our parents the next morning. Most were reluctant to talk about it, but we eventually got most of the details. In those days, parents either dropped their kids off or socialized with one another instead of supervising their kids. They counted on the rink employees for that, even though the business never had someone specifically responsible for watching skaters. I guess that's just 90s living for you. Anyway, a group of older kids started trying to do crazy tricks with younger ones, lifting them up, spinning in circles, all kinds of stunts they probably saw on TV. Someone ended up swinging a little boy too close to the cement wall and cracked the kid's skull open. It hit the worst possible way. The boy didn't survive. My friends and I were obsessed with the story to the point that we decided to hold a séance. That weekend, we snuck back into the rink, lit some candles, and tried to call forth the spirits of the little boy. Fun fact, we also used an old fishbowl as our crystal ball. I don't think any of us actually expected something to happen, and at first, nothing did. We moaned and groaned and summoned until we got bored, and then we searched for more booze. A few minutes into it, music started playing. It wasn't like someone with a radio, it sounded like it was playing from the speakers. Only the speakers were looted ages ago. There was nothing valuable left. All the electronic wires and copper were long gone. Yet somehow, we had a radio playing on surround sound. We looked everywhere for the source, but we couldn't find anything. Then, the DJ said something about Death Becomes Her opening in theaters that week. Only that movie came out years before. Turns out it was actually the summer of '92, but we didn't know that offhand. Anyway, the more we listened, the more we realized everything was outdated. There was also an announcement for a Sears that opened back then, too. If you want to talk logical explanation, someone would have needed to have a recording of that old broadcast and invisible speakers. So what the hell? And I can't think of an explanation at all for the next part. We were a little freaked out, but we didn't get really scared until the noises started. It sounded like a bunch of people were skating. It wasn't playing through whatever the music was. This was coming from the actual rink. It was literally in the room with us. There was a hint of laughter in the air before a loud smack and a symphony of people screaming and panicking. To get out, we had to run straight through the chaos. One of my friends fell near the wall. She said it felt like she tripped over something. Obviously nothing was there, but she was sure that her foot kicked something. Once we got outside, all the noise stopped, including the music. It was like someone had a switch. We lingered for a minute, trying to convince one another to go back inside and get our supplies, but none of us did. Eventually, we made our way back to my friend's house, and that was that. Over the following weeks, we watched the older kids come and go with no problem, but it was years before we went back inside ourselves. We never had another experience like that, but in 10th grade, one of my friends told me that she and a group of kids got scared out of there because of a sudden loud banging noise. They'd just been standing near that concrete wall when it happened. They thought someone had thrown something at them, but nothing was there. My senior year, they turned that place into a gym. After that, it was a restaurant, and today, it's an empty lot. My friend's family moved after COVID, so I don't know who lives in that house across the street anymore. I wish I did. I wouldn't mind asking if they hear strange noises at night. Part 4. The Haunted House. In the early 2000s, I cleaned houses for rich people in one of those super bougie, gated communities. I thought that they would all be newly built, look at my charmed life type places. But that was most certainly not the case. One of those houses was straight up haunted, and nothing will ever convince me otherwise. Most of the time, I cleaned when no one was home. When they were home, they avoided me because God forbid you socialize with the help. I'm not complaining. 99% of the time, that's how I preferred it. Let me do my job and get out. I've got things to do. But this one house, man, this one house. I would set a rag in the middle of the table and come back to find it several feet away on the floor. I'd hear footsteps running past me when no one was there. I almost quit so many times, but I really needed the money, really needed it. Instead, I perfected my routine, made sure that I was out of there in under an hour. One day, I ran into the kid's nanny. She had to come back for something the older boy had forgotten. I was having a particularly hard day with the house, so I asked her point blank, "What's up with this place?" I couldn't possibly be the only one experiencing the insanity. Apparently, this was a murder-suicide house. The wife wanted to leave the husband. The husband was all over my dead body. He killed his wife and 5-year-old before himself. So yeah, I'd say that pretty much explains it. Once the nanny left, I deeply regretted asking. It made every random noise and stray footsteps that much worse. I especially hated when they pulled the doors out of my hand. I'd try to open one, and it would slam shut, locking me in whatever room I was cleaning. Then one day, I was working in the master bedroom. There was a fancy full-length mirror in the corner. I sprayed it down, and when I started wiping it, there was a black silhouette standing behind me. Of course, I turned around to see nothing. When I looked back in the mirror, nothing again. I finished cleaning as fast as I could, always keeping an eye on my surroundings. And then I saw my face. It was different. That was not me. It wasn't even matching my movements. It was like some other woman's face was spliced over mine. I screamed. Thank God no one else was home, because I wasn't prepared to deal with explanations, not at that moment. I grabbed my stuff and ran out. I was so poor that I had to keep working there for another 6 months before I could afford to quit. But from that day on, I brought my sister with me for backup. We still experienced a bunch of unusual stuff, but I'm eternally grateful I never saw that figure or that woman's face again. I'll never forget any of it for as long as I live, and people can call me crazy, whatever they want, but I'll go to my grave knowing that shit was real. Part 5. The Family House. Most of my social media accounts remain active because I get a kick out of the crazy shit people feel comfortable posting about. Personally, I rarely post, and when I do, it's mostly of our dogs with the kids. Never have I ever posted a controversial or political opinion thinking the hundreds of friends or family or co-workers need to hear. I understand, though, throughout the history of man, there's always been a communal pulpit where any fool would climb atop and beckon the people's attention if their voice was loud enough. Controversies are meant to be discussed. I get it. I can ignore my best friend's mom and her slightly offensive posts. But some of the shit that I see on here is crazy. A guy I knew in high school lost custody of his kids, all because his ex-wife has a restraining order against him because she lied to the cops, said that he was threatening her with an axe, allegedly. Sometimes I think, why do I know this? Why do I need to know this? I don't, yet I do. I hail from a small poor town in West Virginia. I moved as far away as I could, as fast as I could when I turned 17. I was one of the few students who figured out that good grades equal scholarships, and scholarships equal a golden ticket out of there. Secretly, a tiny portion of me does miss the small-town lifestyle. Sometimes I fawn over its simplicity. It's the posts from rural people that relinquish a real, nose-to-the-ground life reporting. The good, the bad, the ugly, all are worthy of posting on their Facebook wall for the world to see. There's a gem of a story that I've been steadily following the transgression of. to the point of reacting to a couple of the Facebook comments, just so I can keep getting updates. A guy that I knew from high school, who I'll name Dane, posted a video he recorded from his phone. It's of his family's garage. It still looked the same from when we used to hang out in there. In the video, Dane's breathing is all loud and shaky, and he points the camera towards, not the actual up and down garage door, but a wooden side door that leads outside to the side of the house. And that door is just ripping back and forth, slamming open and closed again and again. He titled that one, "Garage Ghosts Scared the Kids Again." I thought, no shit, that scared me too, and I'm watching it through my phone. The next video he posts is titled, "Who the F I?" I had to watch this one a few times, but when I saw what he was talking about, it gave me literal chills. This time, Dane's in the backyard, camera pointed at a picket fence that divides his property from his neighbor. By the way, from where I used to live, I was able to see the front of the house that Dane's looking at, as I lived one street over on the other side. I'll get back to that. But in this video, it's nighttime, and Dane's using the flashlight of his phone to light up as much of his backyard as he can from where he's standing, which looks to be the middle of the yard, because the phone's light doesn't stretch too far. It barely has enough glow to show the wooden slats on the fence, and a person peeking just over the top of the fence. They look to be human eyes because they don't throw the light back like a raccoon does. You could really differentiate the whites of the eyes when they blinked and opened again. In the video, Dane says, "This woman keeps showing up, looking over the fence at us. There's no one living in that house right now. We've tried calling the cops, but they won't keep coming back every other night to sweep the abandoned house. I've tried going over there, but I can never find her." He goes on to say that it started happening 6 months ago, after those neighbors moved out. In other written posts, Dane isn't reserved in his beliefs that his back neighbor's house is haunted, and like a rodent infestation, is slowly making its way over to his house. Now, I'm pretty intrigued because I had a weird story, actually more than a few of them, involving the previous owners of that property. 3 sisters, all looking to be in their midlife 40s or 50s, all living together, and all sharing an equally bitchy scowl when they'd see you. Again, I lived on the other side of them. I used to be able to see right into the front of their house from my bedroom window. I remember he and I used to talk about how scary those 3 sisters were. I think because I was a girl and Dane wanted to act tough in front of me, he never admitted to being creeped out by their behavior across the fence. But I know that we used to talk about seeing them up at all different hours of the night. There would always be candles moving from room to room of the house. I don't think I ever saw an actual light bulb in there once. I reached out to Dane on Messenger, and he replied within a couple of minutes. He said that he's only been living back home for a little over a year. Nikki, his girlfriend, had another baby. He said this is kid number 5. So they moved back home for free babysitting at La Casa de la Grandparents. I'm like, that's cool, man. Holy shit, 5 kids? He's like, yeah. When the new one was born is when everything started hitting the fan, like the baby attracted something. I asked if the 3 sisters were the last occupants there, and he told me, yeah. But when they moved out, only 2 of the sisters were there. He thinks one of the sisters died, as he'd only been seeing 2 of them for the 6 months he'd been back at the house before they moved. Without me having to say it, he sends a message saying, "I think it's the ghost of the 3rd sister. I think she's with us because she's lonely, or maybe she wants to possess the baby. All I know is I got Jesus on my side, bitch." Okay. I tell him, "That's heavy, bro. I'm sorry about that." And that was the last message I sent him. I decided not to share my story with him because it sounded like he already had a lot on his plate, and I thought it might stress him out more. But I'll tell you. So I could see the front of these 3 sisters' house for the first year or so that the women were living there. I always thought that there was a little girl that also lived with them. I assumed her to be one of their daughters. She looked to be 5 or 6, and once it was really late at night, and I was riding my bike home from a party. I turned onto my street, and she was doing ballet in the front yard all by herself. Mind you, it was close to 4 in the morning, so seeing this little girl outside hopping and dancing around in the dark, it was an unsettling sight to come across. But she was the least of my concerns as I got off my bike and tried to slowly walk it up my driveway, trying to remain undetected from my parental guardians. Our driveway was gravel, so every move sounded louder than necessary. When I get to the grass of the backyard, I'm able to relax a bit more. Before I fully entered the backyard, I glanced back over my shoulder toward the little girl, but instead of seeing her, I locked eyes with one of the sisters standing at the edge of their yard. It scared the absolute hell out of me. The glare that she had frightened me to the core. I screamed so loud I actually woke my parents up. Their bedroom light flipped on right after I opened my mouth. I instantly knew I was fucked. Looking back across the street again, the woman was now gone just like the little girl. Their yard was empty, and the next thing I heard from outside was my dad's feet stomping down the stairs, too fast for me to run or think of anything. I'd never been caught before, but I'd snuck out a lot prior to that. I was grounded for a long time after that. My dad sold my bike on Craigslist. Some prick bought it for $20 so he could scrap it for parts. Shit was tragic. I remember I saw that little girl a few more times, and only at night. I swear that she would hold a candle, staring at my bedroom window from her bedroom window every time I looked. Then, at some point, I just stopped seeing her. You see how this story could have convoluted Dane's predicament further. Needless to say, there's a lot going on over there, and I always kind of thought that was the case, but the stuff that he posted pretty much confirms it for me. I asked if I could share his stuff, but he declined. He doesn't want to be harassed. His comment section is filled with people that think that he's using fishing line for the door or making his wife dress up in costumes to get the footage. I don't think Dane would do any of that, though. He'd have no reason to seek this kind of attention and is already overwhelmed with the small-town fame that he's building for himself back home. 5 kids, though. That's gotta be tough. Might even be scarier than the neighbors. Part 6. The drained pool. Years ago, I used to be a lifeguard. Small neighborhood pool, nothing fancy. Just 6 lap lanes, a diving board, and a chlorine tank that always leaked. I worked there every summer in my teens, then stayed on part-time in my 20s while figuring out what to do with my life. Now I work with the city through Parks and Rec. We happen to be responsible for the property the pool sits on. It's an old pool anyway. We shut the place down in 2011. Technically, it was a chemical issue. The filters went bad, the water turned cloudy, and one of the staff had a bad reaction. But unofficially, there was an incident that no one talked about. Something that happened late one night after closing. I didn't witness it myself, but I was on shift earlier that day. I remember that despite it being July, it was unusually cold. I chalked it up to a building falling apart. But then, after dark, a teenage girl had drowned. Only she didn't look drowned when they pulled her out. No bloating, no fluid in her lungs, just pale and still. And her hands, they were raw. Skin shredded like she'd tried to claw at the tile. And the worst part, there were fingernail marks under the pool's cover, but it hadn't come loose. They drained the whole thing after that, and they never reopened. Flash forward to last week, I get a call from one of the new guys at Parks and Rec. He says the motion lights keep going off at the old pool. He went to check it out. Reported the place was still locked up, and he couldn't see how anyone could have gotten in. Yet, he said he heard strange noises coming from inside, splashing, footsteps in the locker room, doors slamming, but no one was there. Normally, I'd write that stuff off or tell him to phone the police. I mean, the pool doesn't even have water, so I'm not sure about the splashing. But I don't know, something in his voice struck me. He sounded shaken, like he wanted me to tell him it was nothing. When I mentioned making a police report, he almost sounded embarrassed at the idea, so I said I'd swing by. It was just after 10 p.m. when I pulled up. The gate padlock was intact. I drove around with my spotlight, checking the windows and doors. No sign of forced entry. All as the rookie had explained. But as soon as I stepped out of the truck, I heard it. The distinct echo of water moving. Not wind. I mean, full-on swimming sounds. Arms slicing water. The quiet splash every few seconds. I still had my key to the pool house. I unlocked the main door and stepped inside. Everything was dark. I noticed the locker room lights flicker behind me. Motion activated, except I hadn't walked far enough to trigger them. I didn't think so. The inside hadn't changed much. It smelled like mildew and old sunscreen. Most of the lockers were still labeled with duct tape from over a decade ago. I walked through the showers, across the maintenance area, and onto the pool deck. The last time I'd even peered in, the water was still drained. Cracked white tiles stretched out in every direction. The deep end was a stained, echoey hole, and in the silence, I could hear the echo of my own breath bouncing back at me. But upon closer inspection, there was still some water, just a thin channel, a ripple that ran the length of the pool. It shimmered differently than the dry tile around it on the outside, but it was more than a shimmer. It seemed like movement. As I walked the perimeter, I noticed something unusual for sure. Wet footprints. Not mine. I was still standing on the dry deck. These prints went from the edge of the pool to the lifeguard chair and stopped. I climbed the chair to get an overall better view of the pool. From up there, you could see it clearer. The water was anything but still. No shape that I could make out in the water itself. No head breaking the surface or anything like that. Just the faint gliding motion of someone doing a lazy breaststroke underwater. I watched it move, whatever it was, through the water. Something invisible creating ripples. Watching, it slid forward. When it reached the deep end, it paused. The water was still again, but only for a second. Then, uncontrollable splashing. There wasn't a soul in sight, and yet the water was erupting in a way that it only can when something is thrashing in it. I stepped down from the chair, not taking my eyes off the water, until I grabbed my phone to call the city guy. Somehow the screen was shattered. I didn't drop it, I swear. I didn't sit on it weird, no excuse, but there it was. It had been crushed. I threw it back in my pocket. In the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection, and I stopped cold. The back of my shirt was soaked, like I'd been dunked, but I hadn't gotten close to the water. I ran a hand back there, and it was freezing cold. I didn't feel any wetness. Nothing made sense. It was scaring the hell out of me. I left, didn't look back. I locked the gate. I grabbed my phone about halfway through the drive home. It was perfectly fine. The next morning, I drove by just to see it in the daylight, get over this overwhelming sensation that I just couldn't let go of. The pool was empty, no water, and no one swimming, invisible or otherwise. The city as a whole remains convinced that it's kids breaking in, making noises, setting off the lights. But I know what I saw. Something's in there, maybe just a night swimming lapse. Part 7. The Nursery. Historically, I've never been the superstitious type. I'm more the kind of person who reads way too many articles about baby monitors getting hacked and electrical faults being more common than ghost stories. So believe me when I say I've tried to explain this every way before I let myself consider what's maybe really going on. My daughter was born last fall, first kid. Life's been chaos in the best way, sleepless, loud, overwhelming, but beautiful. We live in a rental house just outside of Richmond, Virginia. Quiet neighborhood, good bones, nothing strange or creepy, at least, not at first. It started with the lights, the ones in the nursery specifically. It's one of those dimmable ones, smart bulb types, that's connected to an app on my phone. I always leave it on a low glow overnight, just enough to check on the baby without waking her. But around the 3-month mark, I started waking up to the nursery light fully on, bright enough to wake a person, let alone a newborn. I thought maybe I was accidentally tapping the app in my sleep or setting a timer by mistake. I double-checked everything, reset the bulb, changed the routine. It still kept happening. Then the monitor started acting up. Not in a technical way, no static, no disconnects, just weird sounds. Not crying or cooing, just silence followed by soft creaking, like the rocking chair was moving. The worst night was about 2 weeks ago. Sometime in the middle of the night, I got the alert that the light had turned on. My side got up and went to check the app, but before I could, the monitor lit up. There she was, my daughter, lying still in her crib, not crying or moving, just staring directly at the corner of the room, at the rocking chair. It was moving, slow, gentle, back and forth, like someone was rocking an invisible baby. I froze. I was almost too scared to walk in. I've never been scared to check on my own child before, but something about the way she was watching that corner made my stomach drop. When I finally worked up the nerve, I walked in. The chair was still. The light was still bright. My daughter blinked and looked at me like nothing had happened. While I stood there, I swear to God, I heard a faint lullaby, a humming sound, soft and off-key, coming from the wall behind the crib. I told my husband. He sort of thought that I was losing it, but I moved the crib to the other side of the room the next day, and I feel better. The light hasn't turned on since, but now sometimes I catch my daughter staring toward that same corner, smiling, and I don't love it. I haven't told many people about this, not because I think they'd call me crazy, but because, after all these years, I still don't have an answer. Just a handful of memories that won't fade away the way I expected them to. Part 8. The pawn shop apartment. I'm 52 now, happily married, 2 kids, normal life. But when I was 22, I lived in a 3rd-floor walk-up above a pawn shop in Lower Manhattan. This was back in '94, when the city still had grit under its nails. I was working nights at a print shop just to try to keep myself afloat. The apartment was barely livable, but it was cheap and mine, and something was off from day one. The guy who showed me the place was named Carlo, and I'm pretty sure that he wasn't even a real landlord, just someone watching the building while the owner lived abroad. The place had this yellow look to it. The walls were stained from decades of cigarette smoke. The light switches clicked too loud, and the carpet never quite felt dry. It was a 1-bedroom with a weird layout, like the living room had been one of 2 rooms before somebody had knocked out the wall halfway and gave up. The back wall had this huge built-in shelf, painted shut and warped, like it hadn't been opened in decades. I used to imagine old radios or liquor bottles sat in it once. Now it's just a sad alcove I never touched. The first night I slept there, I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to a crash in the living room. I bolted up, thinking someone had broken in, but nothing was out of place except that shelf, the one that hadn't opened in years. One of the wooden panels was hanging. I chalked it up to settling wood, maybe air pressure, but I shoved it closed, wedged a broom in front of it so I'd hear if it moved again. It did. 3 nights later, crash. I ran out, broom on the floor, panel hanging again. Inside was nothing. No rodents, no old bottles, just this deep recess in the wall, maybe 2 feet deep, painted black inside. It was colder than the room by at least 10 degrees. I reached in just to feel around and jerked back like I'd touched static. That's when I think everything started for me. Little things at first, knocking, rhythmic and hollow. It was behind the walls when I was trying to fall asleep, always in patterns, never random. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. Sometimes I'd leave the room and come to find the faucet running. Once it was hot, burning steam hot, and I scalded my hands, just turning it off. I didn't expect it. I told my coworker about it once. He said old pipes do weird stuff, but it wasn't the pipes that scared me. It was the whispering, just the sounds of voices in general. I don't know how to describe it clearly because it never came through like a voice. It was more like an impression, like thoughts not your own, rushing past your ear. I'd be reading, and suddenly I'd get this overwhelming feeling that I'd forgotten something. Not something normal, something urgent. Like I'd left a door open and someone had gotten in, but every door was locked and the windows would be shut. Then one night I walked into the bedroom and I found my mattress pushed halfway off the frame like someone tried to drag it. I lived alone. I set up a camcorder facing the shelf. This is 94, so we're talking big, clunky, high 8 tape recorder. It had about 90 minutes of recording time. I set it on a chair and I hit record around 2:45 a.m. I sat in my room waiting. The next morning I played it back. For the first 60 minutes, nothing. Then at 3:12, the broom I leaned against the shelf fell over, not slowly, like it had been thrown forward. Then the shelf creaked open, it stayed open, and then this part makes me sick. Something moved across the floor in front of the camera. Low, crawling, just barely out of frame. You don't see it, not fully, just a sliver of a shadow, a dragging sound, and then the camera drops its view and goes static. Dead tape. I moved out days later, left my security deposit behind. I didn't care. I didn't even try to explain it to Carlo. I think he knew. I think that's why it was so cheap. The only thing I took with me from that place, besides the camcorder, was a little scrap of wood that I found on the floor near the shelf that day. It looked like a tag, flat and burned on one end. Written in faded ink were the words, "No one live here." I always assumed the word that was burned off was let. Let no one live here. When I couldn't bring myself to look at the tape again, I gave it to a friend to check it out. They told me there was nothing, that it was just a static tape, dead tape. I can't explain any of it. Part 9. The Alleyway. I used to work at a cafe in a newly gentrified neighborhood. A few years ago, you couldn't safely drive down the street after dark, but now it's like a little slice of Maybury, except for the alleyway behind my cafe. My friend worked there first, but he moved away. Before he left, he suggested me as a replacement. We got to work together for his last week, and I learned the ropes. One of my duties was to take the trash out at the end of each shift. On my first day, we took it out together, and he told me to be careful because an evil spirit was haunting the alley. There have been multiple murders there over the years, muggings and gang wars gone wrong. I thought that he was messing with me, but he wouldn't relent. He just insisted that I'd get proof soon enough. Supposedly, the dumpster lids have tried to close on his hands multiple times, so I needed to throw the bags inside. The lids fold over the sides of the dumpster, so I couldn't imagine how they could close on their own. The wind would have to be insane. Nothing particularly unusual happened all week. Sometimes we would catch a glimpse of something darting behind the dumpster, but I assumed that it was a rat or a cat. A steak and seafood restaurant is on the other side of the alley, so there's no shortage of wildlife. The following week, my training wheels were off. I wasn't worried about evil spirits at all. I spent my breaks vaping in the alley, and one day, a girl from the restaurant came out a few minutes after me. She said that she'd been waiting for someone else before she took her own break because she was too afraid to be out there alone. We talked a little, and she claimed that both of our dumpsters started shaking while she was out there the day before. That it was violent, like there were bum fights happening inside, but both were too full of trash for anyone to actually be in there. When I suggested it could have been animals, she shook her head. The shaking was so hard that parts of the dumpsters would lift off the ground. It only went on for a few seconds, but it terrified her. She seemed genuine. I was pretty skeptical. I even asked if she'd known Brett, but she said she'd only been working there for a few days. I mean, I didn't necessarily believe her, but I didn't want to argue either. For the next few days, she appeared every time I went on break, and we would shoot the shit till it was time to go back in. And then I had a shift on her day off, and I was out there alone again. It was in the evening, just starting to get dark outside. I dropped my vape pen, bent down to pick it up, and I got shoved into the wall, hard. I barely got my hands up in time to stop my face from hitting brick. I turned around, furious, but there was no one else out there. No one. I walked up and down the alley looking for someone hiding, but it was just empty. There had been no footsteps, nothing. I know I was pushed. I felt something touch my lower back and shove me forward. That's a really hard sensation to imagine. If I'd lost my balance, I would have fallen with way less force. That shit really got to me. I had no way to explain it. I skipped my last break for that shift. It took me 3 seconds to chuck the trash out when we closed, and I went straight home. The next couple of weeks were normal. I was rarely alone, and when I was, it was only for a few minutes. Eventually, I forgot about the incident. Time has a way of distorting our memories, so I let myself believe maybe I had been mistaken. Maybe I had tripped over my own foot. Who the hell knows? Now comes the reason I had to find a new job. I worked the lunch shift on a bright, sunny day. Nothing nefarious about it at all. So when it came time to take out the trash, I really wasn't worried about anything. All I had to do was toss it and go. Well, one of the bags broke open on the back swing, and the trash went everywhere. I started picking it up, and though I didn't notice a breeze, a coffee cup blew out of reach as I bent down for it. It was like a cartoon. I would try to grab it, and it would blow a little further away. Finally, it landed against the restaurant wall, against the back of the dumpster. As soon as my hand touched it, a sharp pain radiated through my wrist, like something was biting me. I don't mean like a bug. I mean something bigger. It hurt. It felt like multiple teeth were puncturing my skin. I instantly dropped the cup and started inspecting my arm. I fully expected to see blood, but the skin was unbroken. Instead, there was a thin, bright red circle forming around the backside of my wrist. I ran to the bathroom and held it under some cold water, but it did nothing to help. I went home, and the pain only got worse. By the next day, it looked like someone had branded me. The thin ring on my wrist had turned into a blister, just like a second-degree burn. I swear it didn't touch anything. All I did was bend down for a stupid cup. Even if I had touched something, there was nothing on the wall or the dumpster that could do that. It was a sunny day, but not nearly hot enough to turn a dumpster into a branding iron. I don't know what the hell happened. My wrist healed after a few weeks, and it's fine now, but I didn't want to work at that cafe anymore. I got a new job waitressing in a different part of town, and I haven't gone back since. Part 10. The Spider in the Web. I'm well aware this is going to come off as crazy can be, but a couple of years ago, my daughter came to me in a dream. Her name was Allie, and we lost her to a congenital heart defect. But in my dream, she was a teenager, a beautiful spitting image of her dad and I's best features. I knew instantly who she was in my dream, and our interaction felt natural and warm. I don't really remember what exactly we were doing, but I know it was something menial. Driving somewhere in the car, the one I have now. She was telling me a story sitting in the passenger seat. I kept looking over at her, admiring her smile as she laughed. Then, like dreams often do, the moment changed without my knowledge. And suddenly, we were at the destination, our new setting. It took place in a shopping mall. It was one I fondly knew from my childhood. I'm pretty sure this mall that we were exploring had been demolished in the early 2000s, but in my dream, it was the location where we were going to buy Allie some shoes. Walking through the food court, I pointed out the table that I had my first kiss at. I could still recap the layout of where all the stores were. Walking next to me, Allie suddenly stops and starts violently coughing. Each cough began to sound worse than the last, and then she began grabbing at her neck like she was choking. Dream me watched helplessly as my beautiful baby girl's eyes rolled into the back of her head. Both hands release and drop down to her sides, and her head stays tilted upwards. When I look around for help, I realize everyone shared the same features that she did. At a standstill, all looking upward with white eyes. Then only Allie turned her head to look at me, and when she spoke, Her bright, happy voice sounded like she was inhaling while trying to talk. In this raspy, low voice, she said, "There's a spider in the web. Leave it alone. Go home." Then I woke up in a cold sweat. The collar of the shirt that I'd worn to bed was soaked. The rest of the morning, I kept repeating what she told me over and over again in my head, trying to make it make sense. "There's a spider in the web. Leave it alone. Go home." Felt like I'd received a premonition, a weird one, but I'd obsessed over it for weeks to follow. I obsessed over the meaning and treated anything spider-related as bad luck and tried to avoid it. Once, I even made myself late for work because the car in front of me had a Spider-Man bumper sticker, and I refused to drive behind it. I turned down a street that I'd never taken just to get away from it, but nothing seemed to happen, nothing obvious anyway, and eventually, my paranoia became a kind of superstition. I'd whisper her words every time I saw a web, like a nervous little prayer. "There's a spider in the web. Leave it alone. Go home." It wasn't until almost a month after the dream that I finally understood what she meant. I'd just gotten off work and remembered a return that I needed to make at this little consignment shop downtown. It was barely a 10-minute detour, and for some reason, I felt like I had the energy to knock it off my to-do list, so I went on a whim. I parked in the alley behind the shop like I always did. As I stepped toward the back door, something caught my eye. There, perfectly spun across the door frame, was this massive, glistening spider web with this beautiful spider. It stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't just big. It was beautiful, symmetrical, almost glowing in the late sunlight, and at the center, that pretty spider still as stone. And suddenly, there it was again, that voice from my dream. "There's a spider in the web. Leave it alone. Go home." I stood there staring at it for just a second. I'd have to break the web just to reach the handle. I don't know how to explain the feeling that washed over me, but it was like I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. Not in that alley. Not in that moment. So I turned around, walked back to my car, and got in. As I pulled out of the alleyway, 2 men came tearing around the corner on foot. So fast and sudden, I nearly hit them. One of them almost ripped off my side mirror as they darted past, barely noticing me. I remember the way they looked, wide-eyed, wild, running like they were on fire. I thought it was weird, but I was too shaken to do anything but keep driving. Later that night, I was half watching the local news when a story came on and made my stomach drop. There'd been a robbery at the very consignment shop I'd gone to. The suspects had entered through the back door in the alleyway, the same one I'd nearly walked through just hours earlier. In just moments before they did, they shot the first people they saw walking inside. 2 were killed, 2 more were critically injured. The suspects fled, but were killed in a shootout with police later that night. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. If I'd walked through that door, if I'd destroyed that web and stepped inside, not gone home, I might have been the first person they saw. But I didn't, I guess because I listened. I used to think that dreams were just noise, our brain's way of filing away fragments. But now I know better. Sometimes the ones we've lost, they're still with us, still watching, still warning. Sometimes all it takes to be saved is leaving the spider in the web, leaving it alone, and going home. Well, my little furballs, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thank you for joining me, whether it's your first time or you're a regular listener. Your support means the world to me. We've got brand new episodes every day, so keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. Before you drift off to sleep, please make sure you've subscribed, liked, and shared this episode with your friends. Your comments mean a lot to me and help me keep bringing you new and scary content. Now, get some rest, my little kittens. And remember, sometimes what's hiding in the shadows is much more than just a fleeting ghost. It's waiting. Good night and sweet dreams, if you can manage to have them.